Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to let people continue to trickle in for another minute or two, and then we'll get started. While people are coming in, if you would like to put your name, your organization, and your email in the chat, so we have a log of who is here and everybody can see each other since we're continuing to be virtual. Please go ahead and do that. And again, if you're just coming in, we'll get started in just about a minute. All right. Good morning, everybody. I think we're going to get started. Maybe a few more people trickling in, but I think for the most part, we've got folks who have registered. So my name is Daniel K. Hertz. I'm the Director of Policy at the Department of Housing. Thank you all for being here. Again, if you have just come in, we'll invite you to put your name, your organization, and your email in the chat so we have a record of everybody who's here. Just a couple other housekeeping things. Please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. We'll be taking questions through the question and answer, the Q&A function on Zoom, and having a Q&A section at the end of the call. We will also be writing down all the questions and putting out a written FAQ following this Spitters conference so that everybody has an opportunity to see those responses. And then obviously you should have gotten this ping already from Zoom, but the meeting is being recorded and we will be posting the recording of this conference as well. Before we jump into the meat of the conference, I wanted to take a second to introduce the other folks from the city who are on the call, starting with, I'll throw it to Managing Deputy Commissioner Cindy Soto.
Thanks, Daniel. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Cindy Soto, and I'm Managing Deputy Commissioner, as Daniel mentioned, here at the Department of Housing. I oversee community engagement, racial equity, and strategic initiatives. And we're really excited for this opportunity. And I just want to give a big shout out to the policy team and Daniel's vision for leading the way. We're hoping that everyone has an opportunity to apply, and hopefully your questions will be answered today. I'll hand it over to Gabby.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gabby Nelson, and I'm a public policy analyst with the Department of Housing. I work on research, policy, and legislative affairs, and I will pass it on to Aaron.
Hello, all. My name is Aaron Johnson. I'm a project manager with the Department of Housing in the Office of Community Engagement, Racial Equity, and Strategic Initiatives. I'll pass it back to Daniel.
Awesome. Thank you all. Okay, so we have an agenda. Let me see if I can, there we go. Move it to the next slide. So we have an agenda that we're gonna move through relatively quickly since we have an hour, again, saving time for questions at the end, and then again, putting out a written FAQ for both the questions that we do manage to answer live today, as well as written questions that are submitted that we don't have time to answer. So even if we don't get to your question today, we will put out very soon a written FAQ answering all of those all questions that are submitted. So we're going to start off by going through just a little bit of background and need for this program and program context, sort of why the Department of Housing is dedicating a portion of its emergency rental assistance housing stabilization funds to a right to counsel pilot. And then I'm going to turn it over to Gabby to talk in a little bit more detail about the scope and the timeline and some of the details of the actual RFP. And then, as we said, we'll take time for questions at the end. So I'm just going to jump right in and talk a little bit about the context and, again, what led us to led the department to issuing this RFP. So obviously, at the moment, we find ourselves in a pandemic where housing instability and eviction has been one of the top concerns, not just of the Department of Housing, but of the city and lots of people around the city and around the country due to the economic fallout of the pandemic. But we also know that even prior to the pandemic, eviction was an ongoing crisis, and that legal representation and legal assistance and the disparate access to representation was playing a role in exacerbating that crisis. So, we know from existing research that nationwide, estimated 90% of landlords have legal representation in their eviction lawsuits, while something like the mirror image, only about 10% of tenants do. And that those tenants who do not have representation are much more likely to lose their cases and have to leave their homes regardless of the merits of their case. So we know that representation does matter in terms of the outcomes from eviction. To address some of that, the Department of Housing has already allocated about $1 million to support legal counsel to tenants facing evictions and lockouts across the city, using $500,000 from the CARES Act last summer, and then an additional $500,000 that was allocated as part of the Housing Stabilization Services funding for ERAP 1, the first tranche of emergency rental assistance funding that the federal government approved back in December of 2020. But we've known this entire time that amount of funding is very much insufficient to meet the need, and especially now as we're seeing the eviction moratorium being lifted. And although eviction filings have not yet crept up to the levels that we saw pre-pandemic, they are definitely rising. And so we're looking ahead to the coming year and coming years, and the need, again, that already existed prior to the pandemic, and that obviously is only becoming more crucial. So in that context, the Department of Housing has chosen to initiate a right to counsel pilot program to provide full scope and limited scope legal representation at no cost to eligible low-income tenants at risk of or subject to eviction, which will include people who are experiencing constructive eviction or lockouts in the city of Chicago. And with that sort of laying the groundwork, I'm going to turn it over to Gabby Nelson to take us through some more of the details of the RFP. Gabby?
Thanks, Daniel. So this RFP is requesting the following scope of services. We are looking for client intake for low-income Chicagoans who are at risk of eviction or constructive eviction, either directly through the Cook County Legal Aid for Housing and Debt program or through advertising to the general public. We are also looking for evaluation of potential tenants' eligibility for receiving right to counsel services, tracking those determinations and outcomes, and coordinating with the CLAD program to ensure as much as possible that low-income Chicagoans most in need of services are receiving extended representation. We're also looking for a proposal that provides full-scale eviction defense services in court or out of court to eligible tenants. We are hoping to develop prioritization criteria for extended representation, in consultation with our partners to really maximize the impact of our right to counsel services, as well as assistance to tenants to avoid or reduce the negative impacts of a potential eviction, such as referrals to housing counseling agencies, housing navigators, or housing related services. And we're also looking for frequent communication with Department of Housing to provide updates on the work and to provide regular reporting on activities that include the number of intakes conducted, number of cases opened, and the closed cases by the level of service, as well as eligibility for representation. Move to the next slide, please. So beneficiaries of this pilot program must meet all 4 of the following criteria. They must be low income, and low income in this context means that their family income must be less than or equal to 80% of the local area median income. They also must be a tenant, and a tenant is an individual who resides in a property intended for or used for residential use, including any sort of house, a building, apartment, mobile home, or manufacturing housing community, or similar dwelling, who does not own the home. And they must be a part of a household in which one or more individuals has experienced a reduction of household income, incurred significant costs, or experienced other financial hardship during or due directly or indirectly to the coronavirus pandemic. And they also must be a part of a household in which one or more individuals can demonstrate a risk of experiencing homelessness or any sort of housing instability. In this RFP, we are looking to fund a right to counsel program for fiscal years 2022, 2023, and 2024, and the contract is operational from the date of award. So through our emergency rental assistance program, specifically the round 2, we have made $8 million available from the U.S. Treasury Department to fund a 3-year right to counsel program. It is anticipated that 1 contract will be awarded through this RFP, and the city also reserves the right to seek additional public and private funding sources. So applicants must follow the directions of this RFP, and all responses must be complete, legible, and coherent. To complete an application for this RFP, respondents will need to set up an account in the new e-procurement iSupplier system. And we ask that you please allow for 3 days for your registration to be processed, as well as to submit an application for this RFP via our e-procurement system. And then we also have an evaluation component. The city will be making, assembling an evaluation committee that's made up of representatives from both the Department of Housing, city, county, or other departments, and community members as well, who are going to be reviewing and evaluating the proposals in accordance with the evaluation criteria that we have on this slide. We've allocated 30 points to organizational experience, 30 points to the proposed program, 20 to reasonable costs, your budget justification and leverage of funds, and 20 points to program impact and evaluation. And that brings us to question and answer, which Daniel, Cindy, and I will be working through.
Yes, thank you, Gabby. So I still cannot actually see the questions, but I think they're being posted in the chat. Let me see if I can bring them up. Yeah, okay. So if there's more, I see about 6 of them. If there's more, if other panelists who can see them could either read them out loud once we've gotten through the first 6, or just post them in the chat so I can see them. So The first question is this contract only for legal work, legal representation? So the answer to that is yes, this RFP is intended for legal, oh, there we go. For legal representation. We do have other, this is not the total of the funds that the city has available for housing stabilization services under ERAP 2. And we do anticipate issuing additional requests for proposals for other eviction and tenant support work. Obviously, we recognize that legal support is only one piece of what is needed for a sort of tenant support ecosystem. So the short answer is for this RFP, yes, this is only for legal work or legal representation. We do anticipate issuing additional RFPs for other aspects of tenant stabilization support. The second question I see, does the work have to involve an already filed eviction matter? No, the way that we have described this, it can cover both actual filed evictions, but can also cover situations where someone is experiencing a constructive eviction or lockout. So it is not necessarily limited to already filed eviction cases. As far as next question, might community education, referral, and related work be covered? I think we would probably need to see more detail on that. I do believe, Gabby, I don't know if you have more detail on this in front of you. I'm trying to go through the RFP. There is some scope for sort of marketing and intake. Gabby, I don't know, is there any more detail you would add to that? And if not, we can expound on that more in the written response to the question.
Yeah, in terms of scope of services, we are looking for there to be referrals to other agencies who are also working on any sort of housing stabilization matters. So that is covered in the RFP.
Great, thank you. Might public policy advocacy be covered? That is not covered under this, and I don't believe that we have the ability even to do that with the source of funds that we're using here. I'm going to skip the Beijing Olympics question. The next one is the time frame to apply is quite short, particularly during the holidays. Will another RFP for this program be released next year? So that we definitely take to heart. Obviously, we feel a lot of need to try and get these services out and available, but also want to make sure that people have time to submit the time that they need to submit, high quality proposals. So if that's something that you think your organization is interested in submitting, but you think that the timeline that's been outlined right now is impeding your ability to submit, I think that's something that that's feedback that we very much want to hear now, and we can take that into account because we don't want to have this, open and close in a way that's not doesn't make it possible for people to submit proposals that they feel are high quality. And I see Jennifer sharing that, in fact, it is impeding their ability to submit. So thank you. And anybody else who feels that way, again, if you want to, you can put it in the chat, you can send via email. That feedback is very helpful. The next question I see is for applicants submitting a collaborative application, should each partner submit a separate application or should they submit under one? If the latter, should the budget submission include subcontract amounts and details? Yeah, so I believe submitting under one with subcontract information would be the best way to go. Gabby, don't know if you have anything else to share on that.
No, I agree with you that it should be submitted under one.
Great. Michelle has a question for the eligibility criteria of financial hardship and risk of homelessness. Are these two criteria an and or an or? That is under federal ERAP guidelines and There's a little bit more flavor on that risk of homelessness, a little more detail on that in the Treasury guidelines. We can share the exact wording we can share the exact wording in the FAQ that we'll distribute. It's a little bit more, there's a little bit more detail than just risk of homelessness, which I know sounds like can sound like a high bar. And then finally, should the budget reflect the 3-year 8.0 million total, or should it be broken into single year budgets? I believe, Gabby, correct me if I'm wrong, we would be looking for annual budgets on that. Part of, I think, what we're anticipating certainly is that people will need some time to, to ramp up services to the sort of full amount. So we're definitely interested in how applicants or proposers foresee themselves doing that. How closely is this project and funding aligned with the existing CLAD, Cook County Legal Aid for Housing and Debt network? It is closely aligned in the sense that the City of Chicago Department of Housing is obviously a partner of CLAD, and these services will be working closely as part of that program. So yeah, it will be closely aligned with CLAD. And then the last question I see here is, can the proposed project involve a volunteer component? That is a good question that I am actually not certain of the answer to. Gabby or anybody else from the city on the call, has that come up previously?
I'd be curious to hear more about what component volunteers can help with. I don't know who asked the question.
If that person who asked the question could use the raise the hand feature, I can allow you to speak more to that question. Okay, you should have the ability to unmute yourself now.
Hi, this is Misha Fleischman from Legal Aid Chicago. I'm just asking because we have a volunteer program that we're developing to serve tenants living in the suburbs currently. I know that this is a city grant, so we were wondering if we could potentially, as a component of the project in coming years, develop a portion of the project to include a volunteer component, in the sense that volunteers would be supported by legal. So it's not fully fleshed out yet, but I'm just curious if volunteers would be able to be supported by this grant, not so much as paying for them, but paying for the work surrounding the volunteer project.
Okay, so this would be like volunteer attorneys?
Yes. Yep. And it wouldn't be the entirety of the project. It would just be a component.
I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of the legal advocacy, legal support in the courthouse. But we can confer here at DOH just to make sure we get you concrete information. We'll make sure we respond to that more clearly.
Yeah, I similarly, I can't think of a reason right now that would not be allowed, but I think we'll want to get you a firmer answer than that in writing after this. But thanks for the question.
We don't have any more questions in the chat, Daniel. So if folks want to raise your hand, and then we can make sure that you can unmute if you want to ask a question.
I do see one more in the Q&A.
Oh, is there? Okay.
I see. Yeah, so the question is, did we say that we are only planning to award one grant? So we are anticipating one grant. Again, as we said on a previous question, very much open to a sort of partnership with subcontracts as well. But we are anticipating awarding one grant for this RFP. And as Sandy said, if there's other questions, yeah, feel free to put them in the chat or raise hand function at this point, since we don't have any more questions in the Q&A. While we're waiting for people to type, if anybody's typing or formulating their question, we'll just reiterate again, we will share after this the slides that were presented here, as well as the video of the recording of the presentation and question and answer session. And we will also be both the questions that are asked today and any other questions that we receive via email. We will be putting answers in writing and sharing that with everybody publicly in an FAQ soon. We do have one more question. The RFP didn't list a deadline to ask questions. Is there a set deadline, or are we allowed to ask questions throughout the proposal period? Did we not set a deadline to ask questions? I guess not. I would say in that case, we can answer questions throughout the proposal period. Obviously, it's probably more helpful for everybody the earlier they come. But we will take questions throughout the proposal period, and we will periodically update the public FAQ with any additional questions that we receive.
And just a disclaimer on the questions that will happen post this bidders conference. We would have to publicize them so that everybody has the response. Otherwise, we would be giving an advantage to one group over the other, and that's not allowed for us to do. So just know that your question will be publicized, and so others can see the response as well.
And just to, I think I've misspoken, for questions that are coming after this conference, please submit those through iSupplier rather than through email. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. So again, we'll be sharing all the information and materials from this conference. We will, we also welcome, again, heard from at least one or two of you right now, but if there's others who feel that the timeline of this RFP is impeding their ability to submit a complete and high quality application, again, please do let us know that one definitely sooner rather than later. And we can definitely take that into account. With that, I don't know, Gabby, Cindy, Aaron, anything additional to share?
No, I think we're good. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And thank you, Daniel and Gabby.
Yeah, thank you all for joining here. Definitely thanks to Gabby and Aaron and Cindy for all everything that got us here, and really looking forward to seeing all of your proposals and making sure that the service is one that Chicagoans can count on. Thanks again.